Last week in Michigan politics, Grand Rapids playing host to one of the highest-ranking officials in the land. What Vice President Kamala Harris had to say amid a tight race for re-election. Plus, the push for Democrats to vote uncommitted in the presidential primary. We explain who's behind the effort and how it could affect the outcome. And as the Michigan State University community earlier this month marked 1 year since the shooting that rocked their campus, students who called for legislative change following the tragedy reflect on where we are now. I'm Josh Alburtus, and this is your 13 on Your Side Rundown. Vice President Kamala Harris has made her way back to Washington after spending Thursday in West Michigan. She arrived at Ford International Airport Thursday afternoon and then spoke about reproductive rights at Fountain Street Church in Grand Rapids. We were there to bring you the news from the VP's visit amid a tough political landscape for the administration here in Michigan. Vice President Kamala Harris touching down in Kent County Monday to continue a nationwide tour on the issue of abortion.
In states across our country, people have been suffering, and we must be explicit about what that is.
The issue has largely been successful for Democratic messaging as voters in several states, including Michigan, have codified abortion rights into their state constitutions after the nationwide right was repealed almost 2 years ago.
Freedom is fundamental to the promise of America. And what we saw over a year ago is the highest court in our land, the United States Supreme Court, the Court of Thurgood and RBG, took a constitutional right that had been recognized from the people of America, from the women of America.
Now, while this was the focus for the vice president on Thursday, her trip came under a cloud of electoral uncertainty for the administration. The latest statewide poll out on Wednesday from Epic MRA showed former President Donald Trump with an edge over President Biden in a head-to-head matchup in Michigan. It also comes as some, particularly many Arab American voters in the state, have expressed anger over the administration's handling of the Israel-Hamas war and what they see as too much support for the military actions of the Israeli government.
There is a whole swath of us, people who are looking at our president and his handling of the situation in Gaza and thinking this is not the way.
But the large percentage of undecided voters in Wednesday's poll suggests the state is still very much in play. It's why candidates of all stripes have descended on Michigan in recent weeks and in the days ahead. Former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley expected to rally supporters in Grand Rapids Monday, and former President Trump already making multiple visits to the state's east side to shore up his Republican support.
If we win Michigan, we win the whole ball game.
The auto workers are going to support this guy like we did in 16, 20, we're going to do it again in 24.
But on Thursday, the vice president focusing solely on abortion, saying the stakes, including in Michigan, are too high not to prioritize that fight.
Let's understand the connection between all of these issues and the responsibility and the role that we each have to protect these fundamental freedoms and the people of America to be able to make decisions about their own lives and the future of their family.
And the ballot proposal putting the right to an abortion in Michigan's Constitution passed by nearly 57% in 2022. For now, that right is guaranteed, but Democrats say some Republicans are pushing for a national ban, which would supersede state law. That's why they're urging supporters to remain vigilant and get out the vote.
While sometimes it can feel frustrating to be told, you need to go make your voices heard, but it really matters. And that's what's going to put people into office that reflect your values, reflect the policies that you want to see, whether that's about the economy or whether that's about reproductive health and freedom or any other issue.
And despite past attempts from some federal lawmakers to advance a national ban, state Republicans are insisting the issue is now settled in Michigan when voters approved Proposal 3 in 2022. Now, Michigan's House Republican Women's Caucus made the statement when commenting on the VP's visit to Grand Rapids. They went on to criticize the administration, saying Kamala Harris has seen firsthand how the administration has failed Michigan families. The caucus cited Harris's role as border czar while saying they failed to secure the border. The statement also criticized Biden and Harris on tax breaks for large corporations, but did not provide specific examples, and also pointed out higher prices for gasoline and groceries. And with less than 1 week until Michigan's presidential primary, a push to convince voters to choose one option on the Democratic ballot is raising questions on what that option means and why some say this time around it's their top choice. As voters head to the polls for Michigan's presidential primary, there's one option on the ballot that you may not have noticed. Now, the uncommitted option is getting a lot more attention on the Democratic ballot, as some say it's their best choice.
There is a whole swath of us, people who are looking at our president and his handling of the situation in Gaza and thinking this is not the way.
Some voters, like those with the Listen to Michigan campaign, angered by the Biden administration's handling of the Israel-Hamas war.
We're going to show up to the polls and vote uncommitted to send a message to President Biden that he is on track to hand the presidency to former President Donald Trump unless he takes a different approach. He's lost votes here in Michigan that he needs to try and win back by taking a different policy approach to the situation in Gaza.
When voting uncommitted, it means one is voting to send delegates to the National Party's nominating convention this summer that are not bound to any certain candidate.
Really, realistically, we're talking under a dozen people at the outside. The greatest expectation, there would be, 10 or 12 more people uncommitted at the national convention.
Biden's team met with local officials in Dearborn earlier this month. Now the administration is supporting its own plan in the region. At the United Nations on Tuesday, the U.S. vetoing a resolution backed by Arab nations calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. According to reporting from the Associated Press, the U.S. instead circulating another resolution that would support a temporary ceasefire linked to the free flow of humanitarian aid and the release of hostages held by Hamas. To Ottawa County now, where the county's administrator John Gibbs is on paid administrative leave. The county's Board of Commissioners made that decision Thursday. That vote was in direct response to Gibbs offering his resignation from that position if the county pays him $630,000 to do so. This all started back in January when Gibbs's attorney sent a letter to the board threatening legal action if Gibbs was fired. Another letter sent a week ago claims Gibbs was approached by the board asking him to resign and threatening to terminate him for cause if he didn't. The letter claims a discrimination lawsuit filed against Gibbs in October of last year is the cause for the termination. Gibbs' attorney calls it entirely baseless. His attorney also alleges that David Coleman, the attorney representing Ottawa County, claimed Gibbs was trying to seize power in the county after Gibbs criticized the work of his office. In response to those claims, Coleman said in part in a statement to 13 on Your Side, quote, "We are disappointed that Mr. Gibbs made baseless and false accusations against our office in an attempt to deflect scrutiny from his own actions." Board Chair Joe Mosh noted in today's special meeting that complaints have been lodged against Mr. Gibbs, and the board voted to immediately place him on paid administrative leave. None of these numerous and serious complaints originated from our office. Gibbs attorney Noah Hurwitz provided us with a statement as well, saying in part, quote, "The real reason that the board is challenging Mr. Gibbs' leadership is because he is using his position to oppose board decisions that are detrimental to the county. These brand new allegations about his conduct were strictly obtained for the purpose of justifying a for-cause termination." Now, we did reach out to members of the board as well, but we're told they are unable to comment on this decision of Gibbs' employment while that decision is still being made. And continuing coverage now on the power struggle in the Michigan Republican Party. Earlier this month, the Republican National Committee upheld the removal of Michigan GOP Chair Christina Caramo. But Caramo claims she is still the lawful leader of the party. Now, new GOP Chair Pete Hoekstra is asking a judge to settle it. Hoekstra has filed a lawsuit in Kent County seeking an injunction against Karamo. Tuesday, that judge ruled the lawsuit can move forward, and arguments were scheduled for Wednesday and Thursday. In January, a Michigan GOP committee voted to remove Karamo, which was later recognized as legitimate by the National Republican Party. The RNC then backed Hoekstra, who has also received the endorsement of frontrunner Donald Trump. But Karamo has refused to accept the results, claiming that vote was illegally organized, and the National Party has no authority over the Michigan GOP. The party is hoping to get this all sorted out by March 2nd, when delegates will get together to allocate the majority of the state's presidential delegates. This week, Hoekstra announced that convention will happen in Grand Rapids, but Karamo and her supporters plan to hold a convention on that same day in Detroit. Well, several of the 15 people accused of being in a fake electors scheme during the 2020 presidential election had their preliminary hearing in court last week. 6 of them were in court last week facing multiple charges, including forgery, when the Attorney General's office says the group of 15 Republicans signed a document falsely saying they were the state's duly elected and qualified electors. Dan Schwager, who served as general counsel to the Secretary of the U.S. Senate back in 2020, testified. He said the certificate of votes that was submitted did not match an official document signed by the governor.
We could tell on it that it was not an actual or an authorized certificate of votes. It was not an authorized certificate of votes. It was a fake.
Among the 15 charged is current Wyoming Mayor Kent Vanderwood. He was not in court and is set to join 8 other people charged for their preliminary hearing in April. The 6 that appeared last week have not yet been bound over due to scheduling conflicts. And in the year since the mass shooting on the campus of Michigan State University, Michigan has moved to put stricter gun laws into place. We spoke with some of the students on the forefront of those calls for change to get their thoughts on where we are now. Green, a color often tied to the idea of hope, as students at Michigan State University grappled with the lasting impact of a shooting that took 3 of their classmates, Alexandria Verner, Ariel Anderson, and Brian Frazier, and injured 5 more. It was green that flooded the lawns and steps of the state capitol as students called for change.
The time for change was years ago, after each previous mass shooting. But I refuse to be another statistic in the American education system, and I refuse to wait until others come to realize that all those victims, they were worthy of life. You guys are worthy of life. I am worthy of life.
Pressed by students to take action, state lawmakers moved quickly in the wake of the shooting to pass legislation reforming the state's gun laws. Bills instituting universal background checks for gun purchases, higher standards for gun storage, and extreme risk protection orders to keep guns from those deemed a danger to themselves or others, all being signed into law just months later.
We don't have to live like this, and today we are showing we are not going to anymore.
But what about the students themselves? One of them, Clarissa Mata, class of 2023.
I obviously felt really scared. I also was really angry at everything that happened. I was angry at the person who did it. I was angry that there weren't systems already in place to protect us.
For her, anger quickly turned to action.
I like to be productive with my anger. I don't like feeling angry or sad. And so I asked myself, what can I do? I tried to go to work the next day and it just didn't feel right.
Enter her friend, Charlotte Plotsky.
My friend Charlotte texted me and she said, we need to do something.
Together, the two organized, leading efforts to make their government listen. A year later, Charlotte, now a senior at MSU, is reflecting on what was for her a year of action.
Just looking around at my peers and seeing that huge community of us who really were speaking out, we really were caring, we were organizing, we were testifying at House committee. That was just really amazing to see that big effort come into play.
But even now, what comes next for students like Plotsky and Mata?
Are you satisfied with what's come out of the state capitol, or do you think that more needs to be done here?
Yeah, I think satisfied is a strong word. I'm definitely happy and impressed with what has been done and how fast it has been done. But I do think that this is just a first step.
For Plotsky, next steps take the shape of more mental health resources for students touched by this kind of violence and a ban on assault-style weapons.
Shootings that happen with assault weapons are so much more deadly. If the students at MSU were shot with an AR that survived, I don't know if they would have been alive.
Their fight is one they say they've continued in the names of those that were lost.
At the end of the day, like, everything that I did for my advocacy is for the students that lost their lives. Like, they shouldn't have had to die that day.
But the work they have been able to do, they said, stands as a testament to all.
This definitely sets the precedent that we do have a voice and we do have a say in things.
But as they first look toward continuing to heal alongside their community, they turn to the spirit of the color green.
I like to think there's always hope.
And that's the rundown for your week in Michigan politics. Be sure to keep up with all the top political stories of the day, both on air and online at 13onyourside.com. We'll see you next week.